Here is the number that changes everything. In 1982, researchers began compiling the most comprehensive maritime casualty database ever assembled. 150,000 records, 3 decades of shipping data, every incident, every loss, every disappearance across every major ocean on Earth. When they isolated the Bermuda Triangle, here is what they found. Not the most dangerous stretch of water on Earth, not an anomaly, not a graveyard. A region approximately 90 times safer than the global maritime average. Lloyd's of London, the institution that has insured ships for 300 years and raises its rates the moment risk increases charges. Standard rates for vessels crossing the Bermuda Triangle. The United States Coast Guard does not flag it as unusual. The World Wildlife Fund, in its exhaustive study of dangerous shipping lanes, did not include it in the 10 most dangerous bodies of water on Earth. The data is not ambiguous. The legend, by every statistical measure, is almost entirely wrong. And yet, in March of 1918, 309 people boarded a United States Navy cargo ship called the USS Cyclops. It sailed from Barbados toward Baltimore. It never arrived. No distress call was ever received, no wreckage was ever found, no bodies, no oil slick, no debris of any kind across hundreds of miles of Atlantic Ocean. In 1945, 14 men in 5 aircraft transmitted the words "Everything is wrong, strange, the ocean does not look as it should," and vanished without leaving a single piece of physical evidence. In 1941, 2 of the Cyclops' sister ships disappeared along nearly the same route. Same silence, same absence, never explained. 2 things are true simultaneously. The legend is largely a myth, and some of what happened inside those invisible lines has never been explained by any theory, any investigation, or any science. This documentary is about both of those things, not one or the other, both. This is the Bermuda Triangle, and what the data actually shows is stranger than the legend. Let us start at the beginning, because the beginning is not where most people think it is. The name itself did not exist until 19 years after the most famous disappearance it describes. In February of 1964, an American writer named Vincent Gaddis published an article in Argosy magazine. He drew 3 lines on a map: Florida to Bermuda, Bermuda to Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico back to Florida. Inside that triangle, he wrote, most of the total vanishments have occurred. He called it the Bermuda Triangle. Before that article, there was no name, no designation, no official acknowledgement from any government, any maritime authority, or any scientific institution. There was simply a section of the North Atlantic Ocean, one of the most heavily traveled shipping lanes in the world, sitting at the intersection of the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the open Atlantic. After the article, it became the most famous stretch of water on Earth. Within a decade, books had been written, documentaries produced. Charles Berlitz published a volume in 1974 that sold 20 million copies in more than 30 languages. It proposed, among other things, that the triangle was connected to the mythical lost city of Atlantis, that it served as an alien abduction site, and that it may be a portal transcending time and space. Steven Spielberg, in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, depicted the crew of Flight 19 as having been abducted by extraterrestrials. The world had found its most irresistible mystery. But here is what is genuinely strange about the Bermuda Triangle. Not the supernatural theories, not the legend. What is genuinely strange is that the region does not appear on any official map, not a single nautical chart, not a government document, not an international maritime registry. The United States government does not recognize it as a geographic location. The International Hydrographic Organization, which names and defines the world's seas and oceans, does not include it. It has no fixed boundaries. Estimates of its area range from 500,000 to 1.5 million square miles, depending on who is drawing the lines. It is a shape drawn in a magazine in 1964. And the legend it generated has proven almost indestructible, because the cases inside those invisible lines, the disappearances, the silences, the ships found abandoned, the aircraft that sent no distress calls and left no wreckage were real. Some of them were real. And real tragedies, wrapped in genuine mystery, do not need embellishment to feel like something beyond explanation. The stories begin, as so many things do, with Christopher Columbus. The year is 1492. Columbus is crossing the Atlantic. His log, compiled after his death, contains something that historians have puzzled over for centuries. In September of 1492, somewhere in this stretch of water, Columbus recorded that his compass began behaving strangely. The needle was shifting. He noted the sea rising to unusual heights. And then, most strangely of all, he described seeing a light on the horizon. A small wax candle, he wrote, that lifted up for a few seconds before disappearing. 500 years ago. In a world where almost nothing was known about the nature of the ocean, the atmosphere, or the forces acting on a compass needle, a navigator recorded an anomaly in this exact stretch of water. What that anomaly means is something we will return to. Move forward nearly 400 years. 1881. A cargo ship called the Ellen Austin finds another vessel sailing under full canvas in the middle of open ocean, in perfect condition, completely without crew, no sign of struggle, no bodies. The captain puts some of his own men aboard and orders them to sail alongside him to New York. A storm separates them. When the weather clears, the Ellen Austin finds the ship again, empty. Every man placed aboard had vanished. The captain reportedly sent a second crew. The ships were separated again by fog. The ghost ship disappeared entirely and was never seen again. It is a remarkable story. And here is where precision matters. Lloyd's of London, which has tracked the movements and fates of ships for 3 centuries, recorded the Ellen Austin's voyage from Liverpool to New York as having proceeded without incident. So, what are we to make of that? Either the story is embellished, or the records are wrong, or something happened that was never officially reported. We do not know which. That is the honest answer. Then comes the case that changed everything. March of 1918, the USS Cyclops, a 542-foot United States Navy cargo ship, 309 men aboard, fully loaded with 10,000 tons of manganese ore, bound from Barbados to Baltimore. She never arrived. No distress call was ever received. No wreckage was ever found. No bodies, no oil slick, no debris field across hundreds of miles of Atlantic Ocean. The largest non-combat loss of life in United States naval history. President Woodrow Wilson said only God and the sea know what happened to the great ship. In 1941, 23 years later, 2 of the Cyclops' sister ships, Proteus and Nereus, vanished along nearly the same route, both carrying heavy metallic ore, both without a distress call, both without wreckage. 3 ships, the same route, the same silence, the same complete absence of any physical trace. And then comes December 5th, 1945. 2:17 in the afternoon. 5 United States Navy torpedo bombers lifted off from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, Florida. 14 men. A routine training exercise over familiar water. At 3:45, a transmission came through. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, 2,500 hours of flight experience, a decorated combat veteran of the Pacific Theater. What he said was this: "We cannot be sure of any direction. Everything is wrong, strange. The ocean does not look as it should." Control lost contact minutes later. A rescue aircraft with 13 crew members was immediately dispatched into the same stretch of ocean. It also never came back. The Navy launched one of the largest search operations in its history. They found nothing, not a single piece of wreckage, not a life raft, not a body. The official report contained a phrase that has never been fully explained. It was as if they had flown to Mars. Now we come back to where we began, because this is the genuine paradox of the Bermuda Triangle and the reason this investigation matters. The statistical data is overwhelming, 90 times safer than the global maritime average, 0 disappearances in 33 years of comprehensive maritime records. Standard insurance rates from the institution that would price risk higher if risk were real. By every measure of data, the legend is wrong. And yet 309 men aboard the USS Cyclops vanished without a distress call and have never been found. 27 men in Flight 19 and its rescue aircraft vanished without leaving a single piece of physical evidence. 3 ships on the same route, the same silence, the same complete absence. The data does not explain those cases. No theory ever has. 2 sets of facts, both verified, both real. One says the Bermuda Triangle is statistically unremarkable. The other says that something happened in that water that we have never been able to explain. This investigation is going to sit with both of those truths. Not collapse into one comfortable answer. Not tell you the legend is real. Not tell you it is entirely a myth. because the most honest thing this investigation can do is show you exactly what we know, exactly what we do not, and let you decide what to make of the space between them. In the next chapter, we go deeper into the data, the geography, the weather, the ocean current that erases evidence, and the statistical record that should put the legend to rest but somehow never has. If you are going to understand what the Bermuda Triangle actually is, subscribe now, because what comes next will change how you think about this place entirely. Welcome to the Abyss. Let us set aside the stories for a moment. Set aside the ghost ships and the missing bombers and the legends that have accumulated over centuries. Set aside everything you have ever heard about the Bermuda Triangle from books, documentaries, and late-night conversations about things that cannot be explained. What remains when you remove the legend is data, and data, unlike legend, does not care what we believe. The first fact is geographic. The Bermuda Triangle occupies a section of the North Atlantic Ocean bounded roughly by the southeastern coast of Florida, the island of Bermuda to the northeast, and Puerto Rico to the southeast. It sits at one of the most strategically important maritime intersections on Earth, the point where the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, and the open Atlantic converge into a single corridor of water through which an extraordinary volume of global shipping passes every single day. This matters because one of the most persistent misunderstandings about the Bermuda Triangle is the assumption that it is a remote, isolated stretch of ocean. It is not. It is one of the busiest maritime corridors in the world. More ships pass through this region than almost anywhere else on the planet. More aircraft fly over it. More people travel across it. Which means that statistically, even if the region were no more dangerous than any comparable stretch of ocean, which the data suggests it is not, the sheer volume of traffic would produce more incidents simply by probability alone. This is the first fact that the legend consistently ignores. The second fact is meteorological. The Bermuda Triangle sits directly in the path of the Atlantic hurricane belt. Every year between June and November, the Caribbean generates some of the most powerful storm systems on Earth. These systems track northward through exactly the region we are discussing. The numbers are stark. Puerto Rico is struck by hurricanes on average 4 to 5 times per year. Florida has been affected by approximately 500 tropical and subtropical cyclones since 1851. Only 18 hurricane seasons in that entire period have passed without a known storm impacting the state. These are not unusual conditions for the Atlantic. They are the defining conditions of this specific region. And here is what hurricane-force weather does to a ship or an aircraft that encounters it without warning, which, before the era of satellite weather tracking, happened with devastating regularity. A storm system can materialize faster than a ship can change course. Waves generated by hurricanes can reach heights of 30 meters. A vessel struck by a rogue wave, a single abnormally large wave that can emerge without warning even in otherwise moderate seas, can sink in minutes, possibly seconds, without time to send a distress call, without time to deploy life rafts, without leaving anything on the surface that the Gulf Stream, which we will come to shortly, cannot sweep away within hours. This explains a great deal, not everything, but a great deal. The third fact is oceanographic. Running along the western edge of the Bermuda Triangle is one of the most powerful ocean currents on Earth, the Gulf Stream. It originates in the Gulf of Mexico, flows through the Florida Strait between Florida and Cuba, and then accelerates northward along the eastern seaboard of the United States before crossing the Atlantic toward Europe. In certain sections of its path, the Gulf Stream moves at speeds exceeding 4 to 5 knots per hour, which NOAA describes as 300 times faster than the flow of the Amazon River, 300 times. What this means in practical terms is the following. A vessel that sinks or an aircraft that goes down in or near the Gulf Stream does not stay where it went down. The wreckage moves immediately, continuously, and rapidly. Within 24 hours, debris from an incident near the Florida coast can be carried dozens of miles offshore. Within a week, it can be dispersed across hundreds of miles of open ocean. Within a month, it may be approaching the mid-Atlantic, scattered across an area so vast that even a systematic search and searches conducted in the aftermath of disappearances in this region have been among the largest in naval history, would have almost no chance of recovering anything meaningful. This is not theory. This is the documented behavior of one of the most studied ocean currents in the world. And it means that the absence of wreckage in the Bermuda Triangle, the single most repeated element of every disappearance story, is not evidence of something supernatural. It is the predictable consequence of physics. The fourth fact is navigational. The Bermuda Triangle sits within one of the most complex navigational environments on Earth. For most of aviation and maritime history, So navigation depended on two tools, the magnetic compass and dead reckoning, the practice of estimating one's current position based on a known starting point, speed, heading, and time elapsed. Both of these tools have a fundamental vulnerability in this region. Magnetic declination. A compass does not point to true geographic north, it points to magnetic north, a point that shifts constantly as the Earth's magnetic field changes over time. The difference between magnetic north and true north varies depending on where you are on the planet. This variation is called magnetic declination, and navigators must account for it precisely in order to stay on course. In the region of the Bermuda Triangle, the magnetic environment is particularly complex. The interaction between the Gulf Stream's movement, the underlying geology, and the Earth's magnetic field creates conditions where compass readings can be subtly but consistently misleading. Not dramatically wrong, not obviously malfunctioning, but wrong enough that an experienced pilot or captain relying on dead reckoning over a long flight or voyage could find themselves significantly off course without realizing it until it is too late. This is almost certainly what happened to Flight 19. The official Navy investigation concluded that Lieutenant Taylor, the flight leader, mistook the Bahama Islands for the Florida Keys, an error that led him to turn his squadron east, deeper into the Atlantic, when he believed he was heading west toward Florida. The more he corrected for what he thought was his position, the further he flew from land. By the time his aircraft ran out of fuel, they were over open ocean with no land in sight and no means of returning. One of the most experienced pilots in his unit, 2,500 hours of flight time. Lost not because of anything supernatural, lost because a navigational error in an extraordinarily complex environment, compounded by deteriorating weather and a compass reading that did not behave as expected, sent him and 13 men in the wrong direction. The tragedy of Flight 19 is not that it cannot be explained, the tragedy is that it can. The fifth fact is geological. In 2016, researchers at the Arctic University of Norway, studying the seafloor off the coast of their country, made a discovery that was subsequently, and somewhat irresponsibly, linked to the Bermuda Triangle by media outlets around the world. They found craters, some massive craters on the ocean floor, some of them up to half a mile wide and 150 meters deep. Geological analysis suggested these craters had been formed by the sudden explosive release of methane gas. Vast quantities of the gas, trapped in sediment beneath the seafloor, building pressure over time until it erupted upward in what the researchers described as a catastrophic blowout. The methane theory, as it applies to the Bermuda Triangle, works as follows. Large deposits of methane hydrate, methane gas frozen into ice-like structures by the combination of deep ocean pressure and cold temperatures, exist beneath the seafloor throughout the Atlantic, including in the region of the Bermuda Triangle. Under certain conditions, these deposits can destabilize. The methane is released. It rises through the water column as a dense cloud of gas bubbles. What this does to a ship passing over it is severe. The sudden reduction in water density caused by the rising gas can cause a vessel to lose buoyancy almost instantaneously, sinking not gradually as most ships do, but dropping vertically, without warning, without time for a distress call, without leaving the kind of debris field that a conventional sinking would produce. And the methane cloud that continues to rise into the atmosphere above, it is flammable, extremely so. An aircraft flying through a sufficiently dense methane cloud could experience catastrophic engine failure, or in a worst-case scenario, an explosion. This is a plausible mechanism. The chemistry is real, the geology is real. Whether it actually explains any specific disappearance in the Bermuda Triangle is another question entirely. The Norwegian researchers themselves stated clearly that they were not making that claim. Their craters were in the Barents Sea, not the Atlantic. The connection to the Bermuda Triangle was made by others, without their endorsement. But the mechanism is real, and in a place where ships have vanished without wreckage and aircraft have gone down without debris, a mechanism that produces exactly those outcomes deserves serious consideration. The sixth fact is statistical, and this is the one that changes everything when you remove the stories and examine only the verified data, maritime casualty records, aviation accident databases, insurance registries. A Coast Guard reports, what emerges is not the picture of the most dangerous stretch of water on Earth, it is very nearly the opposite. A comprehensive analysis of maritime casualty data covering more than 150,000 records between 1982 and 2015 found that the Bermuda Triangle accounted for approximately 4% of all incidents globally. In a region representing a meaningful fraction of the world's busiest shipping lanes, that number is unremarkable, and of those incidents, the capsizings, the groundings, the collisions, the mechanical failures, not one was classified as a disappearance. Not one. In 33 years of comprehensive data, to Lloyd's of London, one which has insured ships crossing the Bermuda Triangle for centuries and which would price that insurance higher if the risk were genuinely elevated, charges standard rates. The same rates applied to comparable stretches of ocean elsewhere in the world. The United States Coast Guard, which is operationally responsible for search and rescue in the region, has stated formally that the number of ships and aircraft reported missing in the Bermuda Triangle is no greater, on a percentage basis, than in any other part of the ocean. The World Wildlife Fund, in an exhaustive study of maritime shipping lanes and their relative dangers, did not include the Bermuda Triangle in its list of the 10 most dangerous bodies of water for shipping. The data is not ambiguous. It is not uncertain. It does not suggest that the Bermuda Triangle is slightly less dangerous than its reputation implies. It suggests the reputation is almost entirely wrong. And yet, 309 people vanished aboard the USS Cyclops in March of 1918. No distress call, no wreckage, no explanation that has ever fully satisfied investigators, historians, or the families of the men who were lost. Two sets of facts, both verified, both real. One says the Bermuda Triangle is statistically unremarkable. The other says that something happened in that water that we have never been able to explain. In the next chapter, we are going to examine every theory that has ever been seriously proposed to account for what happens in the Bermuda Triangle. Not to choose between them, but to understand what each one can and cannot explain. Because the facts, as we have laid them out here, tell us what happened. They do not tell us why. For nearly a century, people have tried to explain the Bermuda Triangle. Scientists have proposed mechanisms. Researchers have offered hypotheses. Authors have invented theories so elaborate that they have eclipsed the original mystery itself. What we are going to do now is lay them all out, side by side, the serious ones and the strange ones. We are not here to choose the winner. We are here to give you everything you need to decide for yourself. The first theory: methane hydrate blowouts. Beneath the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, vast quantities of methane gas exist in a frozen, ice-like state called methane hydrate. Under normal conditions, it is stable. Under abnormal conditions, it is not. If something disturbs the equilibrium, a temperature shift, a tectonic event, the frozen gas converts back to its gaseous state and rises through the water column as an enormous cloud of bubbles. Water, mixed with gas, is less dense than water alone. A ship floating on water can suddenly find itself floating on something that does not provide buoyancy. The result is not a gradual sinking, it is a vertical drop, without time to issue a distress call, without leaving the kind of debris field a normal sinking would produce. For aircraft, the danger is different. A methane cloud rising into the atmosphere is flammable. An engine drawing in pure methane instead of air will fail almost instantly. The mechanism is real. The chemistry is real. What is unproven is whether any specific Bermuda Triangle disappearance was actually caused by methane. A plausible explanation, no definitive proof. The second theory: rogue waves. For most of maritime history, sailors who reported walls of water rising 50 or 60 feet high were dismissed as exaggerators. Scientists believed waves of that magnitude were physically impossible. In 1995, an oil platform in the North Sea recorded one, the Draupner wave, 84 feet tall, measured by instruments. Verified. Rogue waves are now understood to occur roughly once in every 10,000 waves in the open ocean. They form when multiple wave systems intersect at the right angles, combining their energy into a single, abnormally large peak. They appear without warning. They disappear within seconds. A ship struck by a 100-foot wave has very few options. The wave can break the vessel's structural integrity. It can roll a ship over. The ship can be lost in minutes, sometimes in seconds, without time to send a distress call. In the Bermuda Triangle, specifically, the conditions for rogue wave formation are present year-round. Like the methane theory, this is a real mechanism that could plausibly explain disappearances without wreckage. And like the methane theory, it has never been proven to be the cause of any specific incident. The third theory, the agonic line. You will read in many sources that the Bermuda Triangle is one of only 2 places on Earth where a magnetic compass points to true north rather than magnetic north. This is sometimes presented as a sinister coincidence. The reality is more complicated. The phenomenon is called The agonic line, an invisible line on the Earth's surface where magnetic north and true north align perfectly. The agonic line did pass near the Bermuda Triangle, or rather, it used to. The Earth's magnetic field is not static. It shifts, slowly but constantly. Over the past 3 centuries, the agonic line in this region has been drifting westward at approximately 0.2 degrees per year. Today, it no longer passes through the Bermuda Triangle. It has moved into the Gulf of Mexico. The mechanism is real, but the modern Bermuda Triangle does not sit on it. The fourth theory, human error. This is the theory the data supports most strongly. It is also the most uncomfortable one, because human error, as an explanation, lacks the satisfaction of mystery. Lieutenant Charles Taylor, the flight leader of the lost Flight 19, was an experienced pilot. According to Australian researcher Karl Krishnetsky, Taylor had been involved in at least 2 previous incidents in which he became disoriented during navigation. On the day of the disappearance, the official Navy investigation concluded that Taylor mistook the Bahama Islands for the Florida Keys, leading him to fly his squadron east into the open Atlantic when he believed he was heading west toward Florida. A fatal navigational error in deteriorating weather by a pilot with a documented history of becoming lost. The human error theory does not explain everything. It cannot account for every disappearance, but it can explain a significant portion of them, and it does so without requiring any extraordinary mechanism. The data, as we saw in the previous chapter, supports it. The fifth theory, Atlantis and alien abduction. In 1974, Charles Berlitz proposed that the lost city of Atlantis was located beneath the Bermuda Triangle and that whatever remained of it was responsible for the disappearances. A few years later, Steven Spielberg's film Close Encounters of the Third Kind depicted the missing pilots of Flight 19 as having been abducted by extraterrestrial beings. Let us be honest about what these theories are. There is no archaeological, geological, or oceanographic evidence that any sunken city exists beneath the Bermuda Triangle. Side-scan sonar surveys of the seafloor have found nothing resembling artificial structures. There is no physical evidence, no documentation, and no credible witness accounts supporting alien involvement. These theories exist entirely in the realm of speculation, but they are part of the historical record of how humans have tried to make sense of this place. To pretend they are not part of the conversation would be dishonest. To present them as if they have equal evidentiary weight to the methane theory or the human error theory would be even more dishonest. These are what people tell themselves when they are not satisfied with the answers science has provided. Where this leaves us. 5 theories, 5 explanations. The methane theory can explain disappearances without wreckage but cannot be linked to specific incidents. Rogue waves can sink ships without warning, but the same is true of rogue waves anywhere in the world. The agonic line explains why historical navigation in this region was difficult, but the line has moved. Human error explains the largest single share of incidents but does not account for every case. Atlantis and aliens have no evidentiary support whatsoever. Add all of them together, and what do you get? An explanation that covers most disappearances. Most, not all. There remain a small number of incidents, including the largest of them, the one with which we began this entire investigation that no theory has ever fully accounted for. In the next chapter, we are going to look at those cases. So far, we have given you the data. We have given you the theories. We have shown you what the numbers say, what the science explains, and what the most rigorous analysis reveals about a place that has captured human imagination for half a century. And the conclusion, on paper, is clear. The Bermuda Triangle is not unusually dangerous. The disappearances can be explained by methane, rogue waves, navigational error, weather, or simple human mistakes. The legend, by every reasonable measure, is a myth. That is what the data says. But the data has one problem. It cannot explain the case that started it all. In March of 1918, a United States Navy cargo ship sailed into the Bermuda Triangle and was never seen again. 309 people aboard. No distress call, no wreckage, no oil slick, no debris, no survivors, no bodies, nothing. the largest non-combat loss of life in United States naval history. And in more than a century since, no one has ever been able to explain what happened. The ship was the USS Cyclops. The Cyclops disappeared somewhere along its route between Barbados and Baltimore, in the heart of what would later be called the Bermuda Triangle. The United States Navy launched one of the largest search operations of its era. Ships swept the Atlantic, coastlines were combed, investigations followed for decades. They found nothing. Not a life raft, not a piece of metal, not a single trace of a 542-foot ship fully loaded with cargo that simply ceased to exist somewhere between two ports it had sailed between many times before. President Woodrow Wilson, in a statement that has been quoted ever since, said the disappearance of the Cyclops was one of the most baffling mysteries in the annals of the Navy. He said, "Only God and the sea know what happened to the great ship. That was over 100 years ago. We still do not know." In the previous chapter, we examined every serious theory ever proposed to explain disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. Now we are going to apply each one of them to the USS Cyclops, and we are going to see what happens. The methane theory. A methane hydrate blowout could, in principle, sink a ship rapidly enough to prevent a distress call. It could even disperse debris in a way that would be difficult to recover. But the Cyclops was carrying 10,000 tons of manganese ore. A vessel that heavy, sinking through a methane plume, would still leave evidence on the surface. Oil from the engines, lighter cargo, structural debris, the bodies of 309 men. Searches found none of these things. The methane theory does not fit. The rogue wave theory. A rogue wave could capsize a ship in seconds, even one as large as the Cyclops. But the same problem applies. A capsized ship in the open Atlantic would still produce a debris field. The Gulf Stream would scatter that debris over hundreds of miles within days, but searches in the years and decades that followed should have eventually found something. They found nothing. The rogue wave theory does not fit either. The human error theory. This is where investigators have spent the most effort over the past century. The captain of the Cyclops was a man widely considered erratic and difficult. There were reports of overloaded cargo, structural concerns, and possible mechanical problems. It is possible, even likely, that the ship was poorly maintained and badly commanded. But here is the problem. Even an unstable ship that capsized in heavy weather should have left wreckage. Even a poorly commanded crew should have had time, in the moments before sinking, to send a distress call. The Cyclops was equipped with full radio capability. It used none of it. The human error theory partially explains the conditions. It does not explain the silence. The sabotage theory. The disappearance occurred during the First World War. For decades, one of the most popular alternative theories was that the Cyclops had been attacked by a German submarine. But German naval records, made available after the war ended, contained no record of any U-boat operating in that area in March of 1918. No German submarine claimed responsibility. No torpedo attack was ever documented. The sabotage theory does not fit. Every theory. Every explanation. Methane cannot explain it. Rogue waves cannot explain it. Human error cannot fully explain it. Sabotage cannot explain it. The conventional explanations that account for most disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle simply do not account for this one. A 542-foot Navy cargo ship, in good weather, on a familiar route, equipped with functional communication equipment, carrying 309 people, vanished without leaving a single piece of physical evidence anywhere in the Atlantic Ocean. And it is not the only case. In 1941, 23 years later, two of the Cyclops' sister ships, the USS Proteus and the USS Nereus, disappeared along nearly identical routes, both carrying heavy metallic ore, both without distress calls, both without wreckage. Three ships, the same route, the same silence, the same complete absence of any physical trace. This is what we mean when we talk about the cases that do not fit. These are not stories embellished by overactive imaginations. They are not legends grown larger in the retelling. They are documented historical events, investigated by professional militaries, recorded in official archives, and read into the public record by presidents. And they have never been explained. The data says the Bermuda Triangle is statistically unremarkable. We have shown you that data, and we believe it. The theories say there are scientific mechanisms that can account for disappearances without wreckage. We have shown you those theories, and we believe them where the evidence supports them. But somewhere between the data and the theories, there are real events, a small number of them, but real where neither the numbers nor the science can tell us what happened. The USS Cyclops is one of those events. So is Flight 19. So are the Proteus and the Nereus. So are perhaps a handful of other cases that, even with everything modern investigation has been able to determine, remain genuinely unexplained. This does not mean the Bermuda Triangle is haunted. It does not mean the legend is true. It does not mean we should abandon what the data clearly shows. It means something more uncomfortable than that. It means that even in a place that the most rigorous statistical analysis identifies as ordinary, real things have happened that we cannot fully explain, and the most honest thing science can do is admit that. The Bermuda Triangle is not what the legend says it is. But it is also not entirely what the data says it is. It is something stranger than either. It is a place where most disappearances can be explained, and a small number cannot. In the final chapter, we are going to step back from everything we have looked at and ask the question that this entire investigation has been building toward. What do we actually believe? And what do we do with the things we cannot answer? We have come to the end, not the end of the mystery. The mystery, as you have seen, does not end. It only becomes more honest. We have given you the legend. We have given you the data that contradicts it. We have given you the theories that explain most of what happened and the cases that refuse to be explained by any of them. Now we step back and we ask the question this entire investigation has been building toward. What do we actually believe? The temptation, when faced with a mystery like the Bermuda Triangle, is to want one answer, one clean explanation that resolves everything. Either the legend is real or it is not. Either there is something supernatural happening in that water, or there is not. But the truth is rarely that clean, and in this case, the truth is more complicated than either side of the debate has been willing to admit. The Bermuda Triangle is not the most dangerous stretch of water on Earth. The data is overwhelming on this point. Lloyd's of London does not raise its rates. The Coast Guard does not flag it as unusual. Statistical analysis, covering decades of comprehensive maritime records, places it firmly in the range of ordinary. This is true. And it is also true that some of what happened in those waters has never been explained, not by methane, not by rogue waves, not by human error, not by sabotage. 309 men aboard the USS Cyclops vanished in 1918, and we still do not know what happened to them. 14 men in 5 aircraft transmitted words that made no rational sense and disappeared into open ocean in 1945, and we have never found them. These are not legends, they are documented historical events, and they are unexplained. So what do we do with this? We resist the urge to choose a side that does not deserve to be chosen. We do not declare the Bermuda Triangle a portal to another dimension because a few cases cannot be explained. We do not declare it ordinary because most cases can be. We hold both truths at once. That is harder than it sounds. The human mind does not like ambiguity. It wants closure. It wants the story to end with a clear lesson, a clear villain, a clear cause. The honest answer that the world contains real events we cannot fully account for and that science has limits we have to live with is not a satisfying answer. But it is the true one. There is something else worth saying here before we close. The Bermuda Triangle has captured the human imagination for 60 years. Books have been written about it. Films have been made. Generations of people have grown up believing it is one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Most of what they have been told is wrong. But the impulse behind the legend, the impulse to look at a stretch of empty ocean and ask what could possibly have happened to the people who disappeared there, is not wrong. It is one of the most human things we do. We want to understand. We want to honor the lost. We want to make sense of tragedy. The legend grew because 309 men disappeared and their families never knew why. The legend grew because 14 pilots said the ocean doesn't look as it should and were never heard from again. The legend grew, in part, because the alternative, accepting that some things just cannot be known, was harder than inventing an answer. That impulse is human. It is not contemptible. It is, in some ways, beautiful. But it is not the same thing as truth. So here is what we leave you with. The Bermuda Triangle is not what the legend says it is. The data is clear. Most of the disappearances have explanations, and the ones that do not are not evidence of anything supernatural. They are evidence of how vast the ocean is, how fragile our understanding can be, and how much remains beyond the reach of even our best science. But the Bermuda Triangle is also not what the most dismissive accounts say it is. It is not entirely solved. It is not entirely understood. There are real cases, with real people, that no theory has ever fully accounted for. It is somewhere in between, and that, perhaps, is the most accurate thing anyone has ever said about it. We started this investigation with a single transmission, the voice of a pilot 80 years ago, saying everything is wrong, strange, the ocean doesn't look as it should. We do not know what he saw. We do not know what happened to him. We only know that he is still out there, somewhere, with the others. And the ocean keeps its secrets the way it has always kept them, quietly, patiently, beneath a surface that gives nothing back. Thank you for sitting with us through this, for taking the time to think alongside us instead of simply being told what to believe. The most respectful thing we can do for the people who disappeared is not to invent a story that comforts us, but to admit, honestly, what we know and what we do not. You decide what to make of it.